Good evening, and welcome to the Capitol Talk on the night of Saturday, March 7th, 2026, the ninth day of an ongoing war between Israel, the United States, and Iran. Something happened that analysts had feared, but many hoped would never come. Israel struck Iran's oil infrastructure for the very first time. Massive fires lit up the Tehran skyline. Black smoke swallowed a city of 10 million people. Oil-soaked rain fell on homes, cars, and streets miles away from the burning depots. For civilians were killed, working men, tanker drivers, not soldiers. And in Washington, the reaction from America's own government was described by insiders as one of complete shock and disbelief at how far Israel had gone. Tonight, we walk you through everything: the verified facts, the human stories on the ground, the military's strategy behind the decision, the diplomatic fallout between allies, and the massive economic consequences now rippling across every corner of the world. This is the full picture. Stay with us. Let us begin with what we know. Not opinion, not assumption. Verified, confirmed facts, sourced from Al Jazeera, PBS NewsHour, NPR, The Times of Israel, The Jerusalem Post, and the Associated Press. Late Saturday night, March 7th, 2026, continuing into the early hours of Sunday, March 8th. The Israeli Air Force, with United States coordination and advance notification. Iran's oil and fuel infrastructure, for the very first time since this war began on February 28th, 2026. According to Iran's Fars news agency, confirmed by multiple international outlets, the following locations were struck simultaneously. Number 1, the Agdassi Oil Warehouse in northeast Tehran. Number 2, the Tehran Refinery in the south of the city. Number 3, the Sharon Oil Depot in western Tehran. Footage of this site showed a massive fire raging, with flames visible for miles across the capital. Number 4, an oil depot in Karaj City in the neighboring Alborz province. And number 5, an oil production transfer center, also in the Tehran region. According to Axios, which confirmed this through a U.S. official, an Israeli official, and a separate source with direct knowledge, Israel struck approximately 30 Iranian fuel depots in a single night. This went far beyond what the United States had been told to expect when Israel notified Washington in advance. At least 4 people were killed, all confirmed to be civilian tanker drivers, working men operating fuel trucks, not combatants, not soldiers. The Israeli Defense Forces issued a formal statement saying, quote, "The military forces of the Iranian regime make direct and frequent use of these fuel tanks to operate military infrastructure. Through them, the Iranian regime distributes fuel to various consumers, including military entities." The IDF described the strike as an additional step in deepening the damage to the military infrastructure of the Iranian regime. Iran's state media immediately described it as an attack from, quote, the U.S. and the Zionist regime. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed it launched a retaliatory missile strike on the oil refinery in Israel's Haifa using Khyber-Shikin missiles. This was the 9th consecutive day of a war that began on February 28th, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes under operation codenames targeting Iran's nuclear program, military command centers, and leadership. On that first day, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had led Iran for 37 years, was killed. By the time these oil depots burned on Night 9, more than 1,300 people had been killed in Iran and approximately 290 to 400 in Lebanon. About a dozen people had been killed in Israel, and 7 American service members had lost their lives. Now, let us step away from military briefings and diplomatic statements for a moment and talk about what this looked like and felt like for the millions of ordinary people who live in Tehran. Because behind every airstrike, behind every column of smoke, there are human beings. When the people of Tehran woke up on Sunday morning, they did not wake up to sunshine. They woke up to black skies. Al Jazeera's reporter on the ground described thick plumes of smoke from the burning oil storage facilities merging with the cloudy sky above the city. An environmental analyst in Tehran, speaking to Al Jazeera, described seeing black raindrops on his windows in the early hours of Sunday morning. There is a high risk, he said, of being surrounded by toxic air. He described it as a critical situation, both a war emergency and an environmental catastrophe unfolding at the same time. He added that the civilian death toll, while confirmed at 4 tanker drivers, was likely still rising given the intensity of strikes in the days prior. Al Jazeera's Mohammed Val, reporting live from Tehran, described the oil infrastructure attacks as part of a deliberate psychological strategy. They are designed, he said, to frighten ordinary Iranians, to make them feel that the end is truly near, and simultaneously to limit the fuel available for Iranian military operations. PBS NewsHour confirmed that it appeared to be the first time a civilian industrial facility had been directly targeted in this war. The Associated Press described massive flames lighting up the night sky over Tehran and neighboring Karaj, with fireballs and thick black smoke blanketing the capital. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, in a message seemingly filmed in a hurry, dismissed U.S. President Trump's calls for Tehran to surrender unconditionally. He said, quote, "That's a dream that they should take to their grave." Iranian Prime Minister Netanyahu, for his part, told Iranians that their moment of truth was near and promised many surprises for the next phase of the conflict. And U.S. President Trump, speaking at a summit in Florida on Saturday, said the war, quote, "will continue for a while longer." 3 responses, 3 governments, 10 million people in a smoky city in the middle. This is perhaps the most important story within the story, and it was broken by Axios. Israel struck 30 Iranian fuel depots. The United States knew strikes were coming. Israel had notified Washington in advance. But according to Axios, citing a U.S. official, an Israeli official, and a third source with direct knowledge, what Israel actually did went dramatically beyond what the United States had been told to expect. The American reaction, according to these sources, was one of deep frustration. A senior Trump advisor told Axios directly, the president doesn't like the attack. He wants to save the oil. He doesn't want to burn it. And it reminds people of higher gas prices. This marked the first significant public disagreement between the United States and Israel since the war began 8 days earlier. Washington's concerns were strategic and political. On the strategic side, American officials worried that bombing infrastructure that serves ordinary Iranian civilians, fuel depots that supply entire cities, would backfire. Rather than turning the Iranian public against their government, it might do the opposite. History has shown repeatedly that when civilians bear the consequences of foreign military strikes, they often rally closer to their own government, not further away. On the political side, images of burning oil depots, oil prices above $100 a barrel, and rising gas prices at American pumps are politically toxic for President Trump, who had campaigned heavily on the cost of living. Meanwhile, Iran's military command structure issued a direct and public warning. The spokesman for Iran's Qadam al-Anbiya headquarters stated that if attacks on Iran's oil infrastructure continued, Tehran would respond with similar strikes across the region. He added, and this is a critical statement, that Iran has, up to this point, deliberately refrained from targeting regional fuel and energy infrastructure. If that changes, he warned, oil prices could reach $200 a barrel. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf reinforced the warning, saying that if infrastructure attacks continued, Iran would retaliate, quote, without delay. An Israeli military official, speaking anonymously to NPR, said Israel believes it needs 3 more weeks to accomplish its stated goal of destroying Iran's military forces, and that Israel is fighting as if every day of the war could be its last. 3 more weeks. In a conflict moving at this speed, that timeline is extremely significant. We now turn to what is arguably the most consequential dimension of this war for people who are nowhere near the Middle East. Because this conflict is not only being fought in Tehran and Tel Aviv. It is being fought in your energy bills, in your grocery store, in your country's central bank meetings, and in the boardrooms of every major corporation on Earth. Let us go through this carefully, fact by fact. Before this war began on February 28th, Brent crude oil, the global benchmark, was trading at approximately $65 to $67 per barrel. By March 9th, today, oil prices have surged past $100 a barrel. According to Al Jazeera, Brent crude at one point topped $119 a barrel on Sunday before pulling back slightly to around $110, as G7 finance ministers discussed releasing petroleum reserves in coordination with the International Energy Agency. This is the first time oil has exceeded $100 per barrel since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Global oil prices have risen more than 25% since the start of this war, according to Al Jazeera's energy market reporting. Brent crude has risen 36% so far in 2026, according to financial data firm LSG. For American consumers, the national average gasoline price reached $3.41 per gallon on Saturday, a rise of 43 cents in a single week, according to the American Automobile Association. In Europe, Germany's ADAC Automobile Association confirmed that gasoline and diesel prices had jumped by double digits over the past week. UK gasoline prices have also climbed significantly. Iran's military warned that if oil infrastructure attacks continue and Iran retaliates in kind, prices could reach $200 per barrel. Qatar's energy minister Saad Al-Kaabi warned the Financial Times that all regional producers could soon be forced to halt production entirely, and that prices could hit $150 a barrel. Goldman Sachs research has estimated that traders are demanding approximately $14 more per barrel than before the conflict, reflecting a war risk premium. Goldman Sachs also warned that if oil prices remain at current levels for several months, U.S. consumer price inflation could rise from 2.4% in January to 3% by the end of the year. The reason oil prices are reacting so dramatically is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf through which approximately 20 million barrels of oil flow every single day, accounting for roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. According to Chatham House, around a quarter of global seaborne oil and roughly one-fifth of global liquefied natural gas shipments pass through the strait. It is simply irreplaceable. There is no alternative route for the majority of the Middle East's oil and gas exports. Since the war began, tanker traffic through the strait has effectively stalled. Iran has deterred vessels from passing through the waterway, causing immediate chaos in global energy supply chains. Oil storage facilities in the Gulf are filling to capacity. This has already forced oil fields in Iraq and Kuwait to cut production. The UAE is likely to follow. A source at a state oil company in the region told Reuters directly, at some point soon, everyone will also shut in if vessels do not come. The natural gas market is also under severe stress. On March 4th, LNG spot prices in Asia more than doubled to three-year highs after Qatar Energy declared force majeure a legal term meaning it cannot fulfill supply contracts due to extraordinary circumstances beyond its control. Qatar's Ras Laffan facility supplies approximately 20% of global LNG exports, with 80 to 90% of its output going to Asian markets, including China, Japan, India, and South Korea. A disruption of this scale in LNG supply to Asia has not been seen in years. Global stock markets reacted sharply. On Monday, March 9th, Japan's Nikkei 225 closed more than 5% lower, having fallen as much as 7% during the session. South Korea's Kospi dropped 6%, having earlier fallen 8%, the biggest single-day crash since the 2008 financial crisis, triggering a circuit breaker. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell 1.35%. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 and Frankfurt's DAX each fell by approximately 2 to 3%. U.S. futures tied to the S&P 500 fell 1.7%, while NASDAQ futures dropped 1.9%. The G7 group of the world's largest economies convened an emergency meeting to assess the situation. The war has now placed global central banks in an extremely difficult position. Before this conflict, markets were pricing in expectations of interest rate cuts from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen stated directly, The recent Iran situation puts the Fed even more on hold, more reluctant to cut rates. Nomura economists warned that Asian governments will likely turn to fiscal policy, subsidies, price controls, fuel tax cuts as their first line of defense against rising energy prices. But as Nomura's head of global macro research put it on CNBC, which negative do you want? Higher inflation or worse fiscal deficits? These are the policy choices governments have to make. The International Monetary Fund, which before this conflict projected global economic growth of 3.3% in 2026, has said it is too early to revise its outlook, but has listed surging energy prices, trade disruptions, and financial market volatility as serious risks to that forecast. The IMF has also estimated that every sustained 10% rise in oil prices results in a 0.4% rise in global inflation and a 0.15% reduction in global economic growth. The disruption goes beyond energy. According to CNN Business, more than 400,000 metric tons of basmati rice grown in India for export are currently stuck at ports or in transit. Because approximately 75% of India's annual basmati rice exports go to the Middle East, and the war has severely disrupted shipping lanes across the region. The price of fertilizer, critical to global food production, has also spiked. Supply chains that were already under strain from years of disruptions are now absorbing another major shock. Djibouti's finance minister warned publicly that the fighting will bring severe economic consequences for developing countries. Egypt's president said his country's economy is in a, quote, state of near emergency, warning of growing inflation. Let us now ask the question that every strategist, diplomat, and analyst around the world is wrestling with tonight. Was striking Iran's oil infrastructure the right strategic decision? The argument in favor is straightforward. The Israeli Defense Forces stated clearly that Iran's military makes direct and frequent use of these fuel facilities to operate its military infrastructure. Cut the fuel, limit military mobility. On paper, it is a logical military calculation. But the arguments against are powerful, and they came not from Iran's enemies, but from Israel's closest ally. Washington's core strategic concern is this: when you bomb fuel depots that serve not just soldiers, but 10 million civilians, when oil rains from the sky onto a city's cars and homes and lungs, you do not just hurt the regime. You hurt the people. And when you hurt the people, they often move closer to their government, not further away. PBS NewsHour noted that conflicting statements from Iranian leadership suggest there is a rift between officials looking for a path to de-escalation and those committed to fighting on. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's stated goal is to destabilize the regime and enable change. But a U.S. National Intelligence Council report, cited by the Washington Post, found that a large-scale assault on Iran is unlikely to topple the government. Iran has not collapsed. It has named a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the slain Ayatollah, with close ties to the Revolutionary Guard, signaling hardline continuity. Iran has launched 27 waves of attacks. It has struck targets in multiple countries. It has hit a desalination plant in Bahrain. It has struck the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad. 3 more weeks, the Israeli military says. But in a war that has already killed over 1,300 Iranians, displaced over 500,000 people in Lebanon, sent oil above $100, and triggered emergency meetings of the G7, 3 more weeks is not a small thing. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing is not simply a military conflict between 2 nations. It is a stress test for the entire global order. In 9 days, this war has claimed over 1,300 lives in Iran and nearly 400 in Lebanon. It has spread across a dozen countries. It has effectively closed the world's most critical oil shipping lane. It has pushed crude oil above $100 a barrel for the first time since 2022. It has triggered stock market crashes from Tokyo to Frankfurt. It has stranded rice exports in Indian ports. It has forced emergency meetings of the G7. And it has placed the world's central banks in a position where they can neither raise rates nor cut them without pain. And in the middle of all of this, a city of 10 million people woke up on Sunday morning to oil falling from the sky. They're engineers and professors, drivers and students, parents and children. And this morning, their white cars were black. The question before the world is no longer simply who wins or loses this war. The question is, what kind of world emerges on the other side? Netanyahu says many surprises are coming. Iran says it will retaliate without delay if infrastructure strikes continue. An Israeli general says 3 more weeks. Trump says a while longer. We will keep watching. We will keep verifying. And we will keep bringing you the facts clearly, honestly, and with full accountability to the sources behind every single claim. This has been your news analysis for March 9th, 2026. Stay informed, stay grounded,